Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I am here with my good friend Miss Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. How you doing today, Susan?
Terrific, Boyce. How are you?
I'm doing really well, really well, and people should know that we have our conversations that we call Black, White, and Politically Incorrect. That's where we just say whatever's on our minds.
So we think. Right.
Now you've been following all this election stuff and Super Tuesday and all that stuff. How do you feel? How are your Republican
Uh,
buddies doing?
wow. Well, my buddies go beyond just Republicans. It's not like I just hang out with people, who are Republicans. But I think, we're all a little bit freaked out at how all of this is going. None of this election cycle has been what anybody has predicted it would be.
Mm.
And the idea of Donald Trump actually being the standard bearer for the Republican Party, it's gotten everybody a little bit crazy. A little bit crazy.
Mm. Do you think the Republicans are unhappy? Or the majority of Republicans are unhappy, or do you think that just the leadership is unhappy with
I
Trump?
think leadership is unhappy. I
Mm.
think the leadership is unhappy at the idea that Donald Trump could actually be and will most likely be the nominee. But, I don't really care what the Republican leadership thinks. I care what the country thinks.
Mm.
And the extraordinary turnout, the voter turnout on the Republican side for Donald Trump has been beyond what anybody ever could have imagined. And
Mm.
I think his popularity is accounted for by the fact that he is not really a politician. He just says what he thinks. He says what's on his mind. He's open, he's honest, he's direct. He is not politically correct, which I love. People who say what they think without thinking, oh, well, how is the populace going to respond if I say this or if I say that? He says exactly what he thinks. And I think so many Americans are just relating to someone who is not afraid to say what he believes, not afraid he's going to get some people mad. Come on, I get people mad all the time. You get people mad all the time. We do. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Getting people mad is the equivalent of getting people thinking. So
Mm.
I think that's a good thing. Wow,
Well,
I can't believe that Donald Trump could very well be the nominee. I can't believe it. Boys, I
mm.
can't even believe it.
Well, elections lately they've surprised us all. I mean, a lot of people were surprised that Obama was the nominee back in 2008.
They're still
Remember?
surprised that he was the nominee. They're surprised that he was elected. They're surprised he was elected the second time.
Yeah.
And I think, the country as a whole, well, let me not say as a whole, but I think the population of the country is thinking, oh my God, let us have somebody else already. This whole thing has not worked out the way we expected. And this is the white community and the black community. I don't know who has been more disappointed in Obama, but there's enough disappointment to go around. And I think
Well,
he's ready to move on. I think he's had enough of this. Look at him. The man's gotten old in the past 8 years. You see pictures of him when he first came into office. He's a spry, young, handsome, good-looking. Now he's like so gray and bedraggled and like enough of this. You could appreciate that.
I like
You could
that term.
appreciate
I
that.
like that. I like the term "bedraggled." I haven't.
Yeah.
I've never used that term before.
So there you
I will say that. I don't. You know me. I don't have faith in any of these politicians. I'm not a Barack Obama cheerleader. But then again, I'm not a cheerleader for any of these candidates
go.
either.
Gonna vote? Who you gonna? Don't tell me you're not going to vote. It's
Um,
anti-American to not vote, and I think you have to vote.
No, it's
So
no,
what?
no, no. What's anti-American is no, no, no. What's anti-American is to force people to vote for candidates that they don't support, to force people into a choice that they don't want to make, to force people to look at two options that are not appealing and say, pick one. You have to. No, I don't have to pick anything. In fact, not picking is a way of picking too.
Well,
Um,
what about a write-in vote?
I could see that. I think a
Who would
write-in
you
is
write in
fine.
for? Who would you write in
Um,
for?
oh, who would I write in for? I don't know. I'd put you in there, Susan. The
I wish I could say I'd put you in there, but I would not. I disagree with all of your policies, so I don't think I
well,
would
that
ever do that.
well
All right,
that
let's talk about
and that's just what makes you evil. But go ahead, please
not evil.
continue.
All right, is Trump a racist? Do you
uh,
think he's a racist?
well, that's what I was asking people today. I was asking them on Facebook. I said, tell me specifically what Donald Trump has said that makes him clearly a racist. Now, what's interesting is that nobody could really answer. I would have people that would say, "Come on, are you kidding?" Or "How could you ask a question like that?" Well, when people say stuff like that, that's usually deflecting. That's because
Right.
they don't have an
They
answer.
don't have a good answer. Right.
Right. And then I saw people that said, they mentioned his policy on keeping Muslims out of the country, building the wall, and the connecting, Mexican immigration, illegal immigration to rapists and murderers and stuff and terrorists.
Hmm.
And I thought that was interesting. Not to say that I didn't think those comments could be defined as being problematic, but I said, are we confusing a difference in perspective with, you being a racist? Meaning, if because I think someone actually said, they put an image up where they had Trump, with an angry face saying, all Mexicans are rapists and terrorists, and I said, well,
That's not what he said.
right, and that was my point. I said, did he say that? And so that's the problem I have, is that I'm big on defending the word racism to make sure that it's used, in times where it's most impactful and most provable. Although most racism in America can't be easily proven anymore.
Well, without a doubt. And you and I have had this conversation. Look, you think I'm a racist. I asked you flat out last week, the week before, Boyce, do you think I'm a racist? You thought for a minute, you said yes. I hated that because it's so not true.
Well,
what makes me think is that maybe we're not defining racist
mm-hmm.
the same way.
Exactly.
And that's really what it comes down to. I think that it's perfectly reasonable and logical to express an understanding that black people and I've said this to you before, black people and white people are not identical. Of course, we should be afforded equal rights, equal opportunities, of course. But are we identical? No, we're not identical. Does that make me a racist? In the same way, I'm not a sexist, whereby I'll say that men and women should be afforded equal rights and opportunities, but they're not identical. There are differences. Am I a sexist? Am I a racist? I'm saying no and no. You're saying, yes, I'm a racist. I'm really not. And Donald Trump is a racist. I think that he recognizes that people like, that when he says keep Muslims out, not because he doesn't like Muslims, but rather because Muslims have posed a security threat to our country. So what he's saying is,
well, not all Muslims, remember, and not the majority. But it's important to make sure we know that, right? It's not the majority, and that's where it becomes complicated, right? Because it's very difficult to justify a scenario where you punish an entire group of people because of what a few extremists in that group might be doing.
It's profiling. Right? It's profiling. Yeah. And honestly, I think that there's value in profiling until you know what you're dealing with, until you know who you're dealing with. Considering the number of security issues we've had with Muslims, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful, not forever, but just until we figure out a better way of figuring out the good and the bad guys. We have to take precautionary measures. He's not suggesting that we do harm to these people, but rather just, keep them at a distance until we have a method by which we can figure out who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. I don't see that as racist. And when he talks about building a wall, I want him to build walls because, we need some security here. I have no problem with him building a wall in Mexico. That doesn't mean that all Mexicans will be prohibited from entering the country. Only illegal Mexicans are going to be prohibited from entering the country. Legally, you could enter the country. Anybody can, legally. And that's really where so, tell me again, do you think that Donald Trump is racist? And
before we dig into that part, let's hit those 2 points, the Muslim thing. Okay. I think that what has to be considered, though, is that we do have a process in place to distinguish the bad guys from the good guys. And it's not a perfect process, right? So what happens is that if you really buy into that extremist rhetoric of Trump, then what it's going to say is that if there's any imperfection in our process, meaning if one bad thing happens, if one Muslim gets in the country and does one thing that hurts other people, that, causes widespread panic, then we're just going to ban everybody, right? And I think that's a problem, because there is no perfect system. But it's like dealing with race, right? We know that there are sometimes black people who hurt other people. We know there are white people who hurt other people. Right. And I would be a serious problem if I was being held accountable for what some other black man did. And there are a million of us who don't do anything, but there are two of us who commit a crime that gets national television exposure, and then somehow someone says, we're just going to profile all black men until we know the difference between the good guys and the bad guys, right? We can't do that, right?
I do understand what you're saying, but in the same way, if you're going to profile all Republicans as being racist or anti-black or anti-opportunity or lack of diversity, we all, I think, instinctively profile. We look at anybody, and we make assumptions about them based on what we know about people like them. We all do that instinctively. You walk down the street, you do that instinctively. You make assumptions about people. And I think that what Trump is suggesting is it's not just one or two Muslims that have caused problems for the United States. We know that they hate America. We know that they want to destroy America. We know that the extreme Muslim thinking is completely opposite of the life we live and the life that we want to continue to enjoy. So it's logical to just be cautious about who we allow in. And yes, we have some systems in place, but they're not good systems. At the moment, given that there have been so many terrorist attacks just in the past year, I like the idea of let's be a little more cautious rather than a little less cautious. It's not forever. It's just until we figure out a better system of determining the good guys from the bad guys.
Well, I think you want to be careful about when you use the word they. You say they hate America, they want to destroy America. It can easily be interpreted to sound like you're saying they as in Muslims, right? But you're talking about certain extreme people.
That's exactly.
And here's the thing though. When you have this kind of divide, you have to think about who's sort of responsible for the burden of helping to bridge that divide. Do we as the United States have no responsibility in any of this for example, taking accountability of our foreign policy, which has killed Muslims throughout the world? Even if you look at extremist Muslims, they didn't become extremists just because. In many cases, it was because something happened to them and they saw the United States was behind it. And, our foreign policy has done some pretty horrible things that Americans don't know about. Like in Iran, in the 70s, everyone was like, well, why do the Iranians want to kill the Americans? What's going on? They're such horrible people, but they don't know what the United States. No,
I know why. Right. I saw Argo. I know why.
Right. There you go. They don't know what the United States has done in that country over decades. Right. So ultimately, I just think that, we have to take some responsibility for our foreign policy. We can't sort of have that arrogance. And what bothers me about Trump is not so much that I look at him and say, oh, gosh, this guy's a racist. He's going to hurt me as a black man. It's the arrogance. It's the arrogance. You see, there's an arrogance.
Towards everybody. Towards everybody or just
no, no. When he says, we're going to make America great again and screw those people who disagree and get them the hell out of here. What it kind of speaks to is a lack of empathy, a lack of ability to see perspectives other than your own. You're sort of saying, because what here's the thing. White males in America have a long history of arrogance that has led to them doing harm to other people.
Don't judge this man by generations.
But that's the thing. But he's a product of this. I mean, he's a product of. Seriously, he's a wealth.
And I can say that these Muslims are a product of the other Muslims.
Some of them might be, but we're not talking about them right now. Let's talk about Trump for a second, right? Okay. Because what you're really looking at is you're looking at extremists against extremists, right? You're looking at the American extremists who justifies all American foreign policy and just says, oh, well, if we drop a drone on you, it's because you're bad. And then you've maybe got the extremist who says, okay, fine, we want to blow up your trade center, right? And you can't let the world sort of be run by these extremists. You have to have some measure or some balance there. You have to have people in the middle that say, let's figure out.
Be very clear. They're not saying they want to blow up our trade center. They did blow up our trade center. They killed 3,000 of our people.
Right, but remember, we can't. We can't forget though that we've killed far more in the Middle East. We've done far more. I mean, we have destroyed entire nations.
About that. But
it's important. And that's the thing though. We have to talk about that. We can't talk about you can't talk about conflict in a vacuum. You can't say, well, he hit me, but I hit him because he hit me first. You can't say, well, we're not talking about him hitting you first. We're talking about what you did. Well, you can't talk about my response without talking about the initial thing that generated my reaction, right? So I just think that in general, I think that we certainly need some understanding. Now, mind you, I will say that some of Obama's foreign policy was a little idealistic. It was sort of like, well, if we all just come together and love one another, everything's going to be okay. That ain't going to work either, right? You have to defend the country, and I think you have to have the ability to calibrate your policy based on how people feel at the time. For example, if there were a terrorist attack, a big one in the United States, God forbid. First of all, there would be a Republican in the White House because people want to feel safe. When people are scared, they say, civil liberties and love and peace, let's throw that out the window. We need to defend our country. Right. And that's not crazy. That's logical. You don't leave, if you just got robbed or someone just broke in your house and killed your relative, you don't leave the windows open that night, right? So ultimately, I think that balance is what's important. I think that
But that's where we are. This past year, we have been attacked. We have seen attacks.
Yeah, but they're not. Yeah, but they're not large scale attacks. And we do remember though. Sorry.
Paris was a large scale attack.
But Paris was not Chicago. It was not Detroit. It was not the United States.
Was a large attack.
You know what? I'll tell you. There have been far more children who've died on the south side of Chicago this year alone than there were killed in Paris or San Bernardino. And nobody's here in the south side of Chicago with the National Guard or anybody to protect the citizens. Who killed
those black children in Chicago? Who killed all those people in Chicago? Those young
I don't know. Lots of people did. I mean, none of those guns that were used in the killings were made in these neighborhoods. So ultimately there are policies that impact where this violence happens and how it occurs. Now, so what I will say is that I just think with Trump, what bothers me about Trump, and this is why I wouldn't vote for Trump, is that I don't think you can go into the White House with an arrogant attitude. I think Trump's very arrogant. I think that arrogance leads you to not have the ability to listen to other people who have a different point of view. It leads you to do things that are sloppy and destructive and ultimately hurtful to the American people. But at the same time, I understand why people are supporting Trump, because I think that there's just a lot of anger and general disappointment with the political system at large.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yes, I quite agree. There, I do agree with you. I don't have a problem with Trump's arrogance. In fact, I sort of like it. I like the idea that here's a guy who absolutely doesn't care what you want or what you think or whether you agree with him, whether you don't agree. He said it. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote. That's probably true, because we have gone the route of the scholar gentleman in the White House for too long. These very well educated, I mean, he's well educated too, but these gentlemen, these scholars, these lawyers, and it doesn't do us any good. I love the idea of a kick-ass president, someone who is willing to say, you know what, I'm getting it done. I understand you have your thing and you have your I don't care. I'm doing it my way. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to take responsibility for getting it done. And maybe that's what we need. And when we think back over past presidencies that have been successful, there are mavericks. There have been mavericks before. Theodore Roosevelt, by every measure, he was nuts. Theodore Roosevelt was a crazy man. He was an egomaniacal, crazy man who probably killed McKinley just so he could become president. He wanted it that much. He was nuts. Theodore Roosevelt was crazy. But look what he got done. Lyndon Johnson was crazy. He was insane. He also, by the way, I think was responsible for killing Kennedy because he wanted to be president so much. But, those are my own private sort of, conspiracy theories. But he got stuff done. Look at what an effective president Lyndon Johnson was. 1 term or 1.5 terms. What an effective president he was, because he's just going to go for it. He's going to do what he thinks is right without being this measured, politically correct, let me talk to the pollsters, let me talk to my handlers, let me talk to my campaign manager. No. I love that Trump is in your face. Meanwhile, do I want to vote for Trump? Not really. I would rather vote for Ted Cruz. And, full disclosure here, I want another Princeton man in the White House. And there it is.
We don't need another Princeton man in the White House. That's
Yes,
for sure.
we certainly do.
No, we don't.
No,
We don't.
More unlikable. Oh my God, Ted! I want to like you. I want to feel good about you, but I can't stand him. Nobody can stand him, and I can't even put a finger on what it is about Ted Cruz that is so unbelievably unlikable. But everything that comes out of his mouth is like, oh God, I don't know. He's just thoroughly unlikable. So I don't know if it comes down to Donald Trump against Hillary. I mean, I really am an ABC, gal. Anyone but Clinton. ABC. Anyone but Clinton. I'm curious. Who does the black community think is going to be good for them? Not Hillary. Hillary's not going to be good for them.
Nobody is.
It troubles me to think that the black community somehow thinks that if Hillary or if Bernie Sanders is in office, they're going to get a bunch of stuff. They're going to get free stuff. They're going to get special treatment.
No. Before we close out, I want to make sure you understand. Black people don't vote for anybody because they want free stuff. That's a myth. That's
that most people think. Many people think just that.
Here's the other thing. First of all, there's no such thing as free stuff when you pay taxes to the government that you're asking for support from. Remember, white people built a lot of America on free stuff. Homestead